Today's tech news moves fast, but understanding it shouldn't be hard. That's why Snarful Solutions Group brings you Connecting the Dots, where we break down what's happening in tech and why it matters to you. Now, let's dive in with your hosts.
Usually when we think about who controls the flow of information, we picture something incredibly structured. Like I always imagine this massive, heavily guarded switchboard from the 1950s.
All right, the traditional gatekeeper model. It's very orderly, very top-down, and honestly, it's very comforting because you know exactly who is in charge of the message.
But then you look at what's actually happening on our screens today, and that switchboard is, it's completely unrecognizable.
Oh, absolutely.
We are looking at an information landscape right now that is just fundamentally chaotic. The gatekeepers are fighting the platform builders, the billionaires are playing politics, and, everyday users are just bypassing all of them with a few taps on a screen.
It is a total free-for-all out there.
And that is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to Connecting the Dots, the daily show breaking down tech news and its everyday impact. I'm Alex.
And I'm Morgan, representing the Snarful Solutions Group out of Sacramento, California.
And today is Friday, June 19th, 2026. Happy Juneteenth to everyone tuning in. Let's unpack this.
We have a really dense stack of material today. We are pulling from a variety of sources: tech journalism, government press releases, app download analytics, and some striking reporting from a new political book called Regime Change.
But before we get into this morning's tech article report, let's run through a rapid-fire briefing of what's happening outside your door and in the markets, just to get your day started.
Definitely.
If you are in Sacramento celebrating Juneteenth today, you are getting a gorgeous one. Sunny skies hitting a high of 82 degrees with a nice light breeze wind blowing at about 5 to 12 miles per hour.
You'll want to keep an eye on the broader national map if you have travel plans, though. We're tracking 282 active U.S. weather alerts this morning, and 209 of those are overland. So checking weather.gov before hitting the road is definitely the smart move today.
For sure. Shifting to the financial markets, Thursday saw some incredibly heavy trading. We tracked over 985 million trades for the Dow Joneses.
That's huge.
Right. And the S&P 500 saw an absolutely staggering volume, crossing over 6.3 billion trades.
There was major movement across the board. Over in crypto, as of today, Friday, Bitcoin closed at 62,701.34. That's down 181.54 for the day, which translates to a minor drop of 0.29%.
Let's cap off the morning briefing with the local sports scene. Out on the diamond, the SF Giants ended up in a 0-0 tie against the Atlanta Braves.
Tough break.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Athletics completely shut out the Los Angeles Angels 5-0, with Gage Jump throwing a phenomenal game as the winning pitcher.
Good for him. Now that we're all caught up, let's dive into the core of today's show.
Let's unpack this. Our overarching theme today is the modern battle for the control of information. We'll look at a major UK government department boycotting X, examine how tech billionaires are cozying up to political power, and finish with how everyday internet users in India are, entirely outsmarting a national app ban.
Today's episode is brought to you by Strong Coffee, the premium instant coffee that tastes like a traditional brew, but is packed with 15 grams of protein, MCTs, and adaptogens like ashwagandha. Get clean, sustained energy without the jitters. Use promo code SNARFUL for 20% off at strongcoffeecompany.com.
So let's start across the pond, because we are seeing a significant, highly public fracture between the UK government and X.
The platform formerly known as Twitter, yeah.
Right. Richard Hermer, the Attorney General for England and Wales, has explicitly ordered his staff to stop posting on X. Their last post went out on June 12th.
To give some context on why this matters, government departments have historically relied on X to quickly push out press releases, policy updates,
and safety alerts, right?
Exactly, public safety alerts. But Hermer has essentially pulled the plug. His department will only use the platform in absolute emergencies to correct specific disinformation. He's making a very deliberate choice to withdraw official government legitimacy from the space.
And the reasoning behind this withdrawal stems from those violent riots we saw in Southampton and Belfast earlier this month. Hermer is raising severe concerns that X is being weaponized by bad actors to intentionally incite violence.
Yeah, to divide communities. And if we look at the sources, the details of how this played out are just intense. In Southampton, 11 police officers were injured during violence connected to the case of Henry Nowak.
Nowak was a teenager who was fatally stabbed, right?
Yes. And the tragic, kind of bizarre twist here is that his killer actually called the police and falsely claimed that he was the victim of a racist assault by Nowak.
Oh, wow. And that false narrative was just immediate gasoline on a fire. On X, far-right agitators amplified this disinformation. You had high-profile personalities sharing doctored body cam footage to rile people up.
And then you have the platform's own technology actively failing. X's AI tool, Grok, reportedly misidentified 2 of the police officers involved in the case.
Wait, really?
Yeah, their personal information was widely shared online, completely compromising their safety.
Less than a week later in Belfast, a very similar cycle repeated. Far-right activists used the platform to organize demonstrations over a separate stabbing, this one involving a Sudanese refugee.
A Northern Irish MP actually described the resulting violence as a pogrom. Homes were targeted, healthcare workers were physically stopped and questioned on their way to work.
That is terrifying. And throughout all of this, the sources point out that Elon Musk was frequently engaging with and amplifying some of these agitators. This is where we really have to reevaluate how we think about social media platforms. People often compare X to a public town square.
Right.
But a town square is just empty space. What Hermer is dealing with is more like a public announcement system.
How do you mean?
Imagine a massive PA system, but the owner of the system has programmed the software to automatically crank the volume dial up to 100 whenever someone starts shouting inflammatory, divisive things.
And at the same time, turning the volume down on the dry, factual updates from the authorities.
Exactly. The algorithm rewards the shouting because shouting keeps people in the room longer. So Hermer, representing the government, is looking at this and saying, why are we even holding a microphone in this room?
We're just legitimizing a system designed to drown us out. That is the core of Hermer's argument. In a recent speech, he explicitly warned against letting a, quote, very small group of crypto-funded millionaires use these algorithmic debates to sow division.
But, we have to look at the real-world impact of his decision to leave. When official agencies abandon these spaces, it profoundly affects how ordinary people navigate a crisis.
Oh, for sure.
Think about your own family's group chat during a local emergency. If there's a riot, a wildfire, or an active police incident, we have all been trained over the last decade to open these real-time platforms for immediate updates from the authorities.
Exactly. And when the government withdraws, they leave an information vacuum. In a crisis, people are desperate for updates. If the official channels aren't there providing facts, the algorithm will gladly fill that void with whoever is screaming the loudest.
Right.
By trying to distance themselves from a toxic environment, the government might inadvertently be cutting everyday citizens off from critical, real-time public safety updates.
It highlights a massive irony in global politics right now. In the UK, you have government ministers actively running away from controversial tech billionaires to maintain their authority. But meanwhile, over in the US, some of the biggest tech billionaires on the planet are quietly doing the exact opposite to secure their own influence.
Which brings us to our second story. We are diving into some fascinating new reporting from the book Regime Change, written by Maggie Hamerman and Jonathan Swan. The book pulls back the curtain on the behind-the-scenes dynamics between major tech billionaires and Donald Trump following the 2024 election.
And just to set the stage here, we aren't taking political sides, and we aren't endorsing any viewpoints regarding Trump, these billionaires, or any of the publications involved. We're strictly looking at the reporting from Haberman and Swan as a fascinating case study in how power operates when the doors are closed.
Impartiality is key here. The reporting details a scramble by some of the most powerful men in Silicon Valley, specifically Meta's Mark Zuckerberg and Amazon's Jeff Bezos, to ingratiate themselves with Trump ahead of his second term. Yeah. And the anecdotes the authors share are incredibly vivid.
Let's start with Zuckerberg. According to the book, Zuckerberg texted Trump a photo of a letter written by one of his grade school-aged children. In this letter, the child wrote that they looked forward to the golden age of America,
Which was a prominent slogan from Trump's campaign.
Exactly.
The book then notes that shortly after Thanksgiving 2024, Zuckerberg visited Mar-a-Lago. During that visit, Trump played the national anthem for him over the speakers. But it wasn't a traditional rendition. Trump deliberately played a version performed by the J6 Prison Choir, which is a group of detained January 6th rioters.
Then you have Jeff Bezos. The book recounts a private dinner between Bezos and Trump in December 2024. This was a few months before Bezos unsuccessfully sought a business favor from the president.
And during this dinner, Bezos reportedly denigrated his own publication, The Washington Post, referring to it as his worst financial investment.
According to the excerpt, Bezos complained to Trump that his staff at the paper were terrible and that they don't listen. He contrasted them with his other businesses, telling Trump, my other companies, they listen.
And as the sources point out, This wasn't just idle venting. A couple of months later, Bezos authorized a sweeping downsizing of the paper, cutting a third of the workforce.
It's fascinating to see Bezos, a tech CEO, used to absolute top-down corporate compliance, clashing so openly with the culture of a journalistic institution where the staff fundamentally believes their job is to push back and remain independent.
Right.
But the most revealing part of this reporting is how Trump reacted to all of this behind their backs.
The book reports that Trump would frequently regale his associates with these stories, openly showing off the texts he received and saying, "You would not believe the texts I got from these tech guys." He was openly mocking them.
The book quotes a conversation between Trump and Elon Musk, where Trump points out how much Zuckerberg and Bezos hated him in 2016 and tried to knock him down, but look at them now.
And Musk's reported response was calling their efforts first-class groveling. It paints a picture of traditional political power sitting at the head of the table, demanding tribute from corporate America.
But I have to push back on that traditional power dynamic. The assumption in these stories is always that the politician, the president, holds the real power, and the billionaires are just desperate courtiers. But if we break down what these men actually control, does that hold up?
I see what you're saying.
I mean, these billionaires own the literal infrastructure of human communication. They write the algorithms that decide what news your family sees, what political ads reach the voters, and how information is prioritized on a global scale.
So you're asking who is actually kissing whose ring?
Think of it like a corporate boardroom. The government acts like the CEO. They sit at the big desk, they have the title, and they hold the regulatory pen. They think they are running the company. But these big tech billionaires...
They are the IT department.
Yes, and the IT department holds the passwords to the servers. The CEO can make all the demands they want, but if the IT guy decides to throttle the network, the whole company goes dark.
It is a bizarre mutual dependency disguised as dominance. The politicians have legislative power. They can make life incredibly difficult for Meta or Amazon with antitrust suits or regulations. So the billionaires engage in this interpersonal lobbying to protect their empires.
But the politicians desperately need the billionaires' platforms to reach the voters in the first place.
Exactly. And how does this actually change your morning routine? Why does a dinner at Mar-a-Lago matter to someone commuting to work today? Because the apps you scroll through over your coffee, the news articles your family consumes, the very reality presented to you on your feed, it is heavily influenced by these behind-the-scenes interactions.
Yeah.
When the owner of a major newspaper is having private dinners with political leaders and complaining about his own editorial staff, that inevitably impacts the information ecosystem you rely on to understand the world.
It is top-down control at its most elite level. But the people at the bottom are not just passively accepting what they are given. We've talked about billionaires playing politics and governments abandoning platforms. Let's look closer at what happens when a government outright bans a major communication tool and the citizens use technology to fight back.
This brings us to our final story, taking us to India. The Indian government recently instituted a temporary nationwide ban on the messaging app Telegram. This was implemented over concerns regarding massive cheating on the NEET entrance exams.
The government stated that fraudsters were actively using Telegram groups to share fake exam papers and target student candidates. In response, they ordered internet service providers across the country to block the app for about a week.
Now, 10 years ago, a government order blocking an app meant the app simply disappeared from your phone. Today, it's a completely different story.
The immediate fallout of this ban is a masterclass in modern internet resilience. According to data from AppFigures, the day India announced the Telegram restriction, daily downloads of major VPN apps spiked by an incredible 49%.
It was the single biggest day for VPN downloads in the country since at least the start of 2025.
The specific numbers are wild. On Apple's App Store in India, downloads of Proton VPN jumped 113%. Turbo VPN spiked 85%. And people didn't just seek out VPNs, they flooded into alternative messaging apps. Signal saw downloads increase by 72%.
Another app called iMe, which actually runs on the Telegram API, saw its daily downloads explode from around 827 to over 50,000 in a single day.
But the statistic that completely upends the narrative came from Sensor Tower. Despite the aggressive government ban, Telegram's daily active users in India actually rose by 17% on the day the ban was announced.
Which is just incredible.
Wait, the government announces a nationwide blockade and usage goes up 17%. Is regional internet censorship completely dead? Trying to ban an app today seems like trying to hold water in your bare hands.
Yep.
The harder the government squeezes, the faster the water slips through their fingers, and they just end up with a mess.
It's an incredibly difficult technical challenge for any government. Let's look at how that water slips through, because users in India utilized a couple of very specific technologies to bypass the blocks. The first is something called MT-Proto. Telegram actually built this protocol natively into their app, specifically to circumvent internet censorship.
Walk me through the mechanism there. How does MT-Proto beat a government blockade?
When you enable MT-Proto and enter a proxy server's details, it obfuscates your Telegram traffic before routing it. A standard VPN is like putting your letter inside a heavily armored truck. The internet service provider can see the truck, they know it's a VPN, even if they can't read the letter inside.
Okay.
But obfuscation is like sending a letter in a completely blank, unmarked envelope. The service provider sees the data moving, but they have absolutely no idea it belongs to Telegram, so their automated blockers let it pass right through.
That makes sense. The sources also mention users relying heavily on SOCKS5 proxies. But wait, hold on. I've read that a SOCKS proxy doesn't actually encrypt your data. If my data isn't encrypted, how is it hiding me from the government's block?
That's a great distinction to make. You're right, SOCKS5 doesn't provide heavy encryption, which actually makes it much faster for things like messaging or streaming. Instead of encrypting the data, it acts like a mail forwarding service.
Oh, okay.
If you try to send a message directly to Telegram servers, the Indian service provider sees the destination address and drops the connection. But with a SOCKS5 proxy, you send your message to a third-party server in, say, Singapore.
And the government block doesn't care about the Singapore server.
Precisely. Your service provider just sees you talking to a random server in Singapore, which is allowed. Then that Singapore server acts on your behalf, forwards the message to Telegram, gets the reply, and sends it back to you. It masks your IP address and changes the route your traffic takes to bypass the geographical roadblock entirely.
The technical adaptation by everyday users is staggering, and it highlights a much broader, almost philosophical issue with government censorship.
Pavel Durov, the CEO of Telegram, spoke about this exact dynamic recently at the Oslo Freedom Forum. He brought up Russia's multi-billion-dollar attempt to block Telegram.
How did that go?
The Russian government went all out. They banned hundreds of VPNs. They physically installed surveillance hardware in data centers, and they completely failed.
They spent billions and couldn't keep teenagers off a messaging app.
Durov pointed out the unintended consequence of these bans. Banning apps doesn't stop usage. It just forces millions of teenagers to figure out how to download and configure VPNs.
Right.
And once a teenager is operating behind a VPN, they suddenly have unlocked, untraceable access to far worse, completely unregulated and illegal content across the global internet. The attempt to wall them off actually throws them into the deepest end of the pool.
So the government action designed to protect the integrity of a national exam ends up accelerating the tech literacy of the entire youth population, exposing them to a much wilder frontier. If we bring this back to your daily life, especially for professionals who rely on global communication, it proves a vital point.
What's that?
In 2026, shutting off the internet is virtually impossible. The tech literacy of everyday families is vastly outpacing the speed and capability of government regulation.
The authorities can issue all the blocking orders they want from that traditional switchboard we talked about earlier. But if the user base knows how to configure a proxy in 2 minutes, the switchboard is effectively useless.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap up, a quick thanks to Old Glory, an iconic music and sports fan merch store, perfect for the techie in your life. Use promo code SNARFL for 15% off at oldglory.com.
Stepping back to look at the massive picture we've painted today, the theme is incredibly clear.
It all comes back to that battle for control.
We started with the UK minister logging his department off X because the official government channels can no longer compete with the algorithmic noise and disinformation of the platform. Then we looked at American tech billionaires privately dining with politicians, trying to secure their own corporate interests while holding the keys to the algorithms that shape our global news diet.
And finally, we saw Indian students instantly downloading proxies to bypass a nationwide ban, proving that top-down technological control is quickly becoming a myth in the face of modern tech literacy.
The defining battle of our time isn't fought with armies or trade embargoes, it's fought over the control of information. Which leaves us with a lingering question to mull over as you go about your day.
Yeah.
If governments can no longer effectively ban apps and official public agencies are being forced to abandon public platforms, all while tech billionaires quietly consolidate influence over private dinners with politicians, Who will ultimately get to decide what is truth on the internet 10 years from now?
It's a question we are all going to have to answer, whether we want to or not.
We're here to help at Snarful, so reach out on our website if you have any more questions.
That's a wrap on today's top stories. Remember, tech doesn't have to be complicated, and we're here to help connect the dots. If you've got questions or want to learn more, visit us at snarful.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.